I'm Sarah Baxley, and welcome to Pinkie the Bear. This is my Mystics, Metaphysics, and Mindfulness channel, and I'm here today with your astrology forecast for the week of October 21st, 2018. So the two upcoming themes for this week are 1. Hopping in for a swim, and 2. Breaking free. Okay, so let's start out with the first theme of the week, which is hopping in for a swim. And basically where I kind of got this theme from is with the upcoming ingress of the sun into the sign of Scorpio this upcoming Tuesday. So we already have 3 planets in Scorpio right now, right? We have Mercury that's recently gone into Scorpio. We've had Jupiter that's been in Scorpio since last fall. We have Venus retrograde, right, that's been in Scorpio for quite some time, kind of going back and forth over the first decan of degrees in Scorpio. And now we're going to have the sun enter Scorpio as well. So that's going to be 4 different planets, not only in water signs, because we have Neptune and Pisces as well, so that would be 5 water signs, but we also have now 4 different planets in Scorpio. And so basically, you know, I kind of want to unpack that a little bit, because Scorpio reports directly to Mars, right? And so there's almost like a certain amount of kind of assertion and you know, like an aggression and like kind of standing up for oneself that kind of comes along with kind of that Mars ruled energy. But you know, when we kind of like open up Scorpio a little bit, it is a fixed water sign, right? So water again is all about our emotions, our emotional self, right? Emotional healing that's occurring. Kind of really with Scorpio being a fixed sign, which is like holding firm and steady, it's a lot about kind of really kind of seeing what emotions that we've kind of maybe held on to for a little bit too long that aren't really kind of really serving us in our life anymore. You know, when you have this many planets that are in Scorpio, it really gives us permission to kind of dive down into kind of the deep parts of our soul that maybe sometimes aren't always easy to kind of dive into, right? Maybe certain things that maybe hurt a little bit, or maybe we just kind of feel a little bit too much. So maybe it's a certain part of us that we've kind of really kind of pushed down deep into our psyche, you know, to kind of maybe deal with it at another time, or maybe not necessarily deal with it all. And basically back to the theme, which is hopping in for a swim, I put that because, you know, it's like we're really diving into these like really deep waters and these deep emotional depths, you know, and we kind of already have been there. I'm sure that a lot of you have realized, you know, that we've kind of like we've reached some kind of like deeper emotional places a little bit over the last couple weeks, and sometimes that always doesn't feel so awesome. So, you know, but you know, we have to really, you know, one of the beautiful things about Scorpio is that it has this like really deep ability to kind of like dive down into these things so that this healing can occur, right? So that way this kind of turning over and starting a new leaf can kind of like make its way, like specifically in regards to our emotions. So now we've already had these 3 planets in Scorpio, now we have the sun coming to join it as well this upcoming Tuesday. And so it's really kind of sealing the deal, right? Like all of the planets in our solar system, we all revolve around the sun. The sun is huge, it's ginormous, it's what gives us light, you know, it's what gives us life, right? And so it's kind of like our shift and our focus is kind of more really going into these deep, emotionally intimate places, whether or not that's with ourselves, whether or not that's sharing with others, but it's kind of just allowing a little bit of space for the vulnerable parts inside of us, right? That we often kind of keep hidden away. So that's just like a really big part of it, because I think that a lot of times, when we have this many planets in Scorpio, there's a lot of really deep emotional healing that can really surface from this place. And you know, but sometimes that's not always easy. Sometimes we don't always want to kind of visit these like emotions that maybe we've kind of brushed away or brushed to the side. So you know, if you feel like over the course of this week that there's going to be certain emotions that sort of come up for you, or certain things that you're like, ooh, that does not feel awesome. Where did that come from? You know, maybe just take a minute and step back, because I know that I've talked about this before, but often when we have some type of emotional trigger that's like that, where we feel like we're totally fine and on an even keel, and then something that's like really silly that kind of came out of nowhere almost like presses or like hits the button for us, and it's kind of like these feelings come up and sort of triggers those emotional feelings to come up. Essentially, you know, we wouldn't have been able to heal those feelings that have been hidden away had they not sort of like been pressed on, right? Had they not had this like magic button that kind of like got pressed, even if it's from something random like a certain song coming on, or maybe you see a certain thing like in the passing of your day, you know, that kind of jogs your memory or like hits like a certain soft spot. But you know, it's really I just really want to hone that it's really a blessing when those things happen, because if we don't sort of have these like booby traps, right, of our emotions kind of like getting unlocked, then essentially we're kind of suppressing these really hard emotional feelings like within us for a long time. So even though it doesn't feel good necessarily to have these emotions sort of brought to the surface, if you will, you know, I think one of the beautiful things is that with them getting brought to the surface, we can then take the time to acknowledge them and to honor them, and to really, you know, kind of love that part of ourself that might have some hurt wrapped around those places. So anyway, just kind of wanted to bring that up, because with this sun moon, the sun's ingress into Scorpio this upcoming week, in addition with the other 3 planets in Scorpio, you know, we're going to see some of that both this week as well as next week, when the sun, I think around Halloween time, when the sun comes to hit the exact same degree that Venus stationed retrograde. So just something to keep in mind. So then the second theme of this week is breaking free. So basically this revolves around, we have a really big full moon that comes up this upcoming Wednesday, October 24th. And I've kept an eye on this full moon for a while, probably because I personally have like a lot of personal planets and points and different things in the first decan of fixed signs myself. And so this is something that I've kind of kept an eye on for a while. And, you know, this particular full moon so it's the full moon in Taurus, right? And so the sun is in Scorpio, the moon is in Taurus. We have Venus that's come to get really, really close in orb to the sun. And we have the moon that's in a really close orb to Uranus. And so essentially what all of that means is, you know, with the sun joining Venus and getting close, I mean, there's still a few degrees away from one another. I think the sun will be at 1 degree and I believe Venus will be at 3 degrees. But with the sun joining with Venus here, you know, it's really kind of trying to really hone into whatever the themes have been for us from this Venus retrograde over the past couple weeks, and which will continue to surface through the middle of November. And so it's kind of bringing a certain type of consciousness and awareness to this sort of emotional journey and healing that we've already been on thanks to Venus retrograde. Now, meanwhile, opposite of that, right, we have the moon going into Taurus, right? And Taurus is, the moon is exalted in the sign of Taurus. It's a more comfortable place for the moon to be, right? Taurus is ruled by Venus, and it's very much about like enjoying the senses, and very much, I think, about staying present and in the present moment. However, we have Uranus that's kind of coming to join the moon as well, which is like the planet of like spontaneous change. I think I've talked about it as like Uranus is like ripping off a band-aid, right? If you, of the planets in our solar system, it's really awesome because it's kind of tilted on its side, and it has, you know, it has kind of like this funky axis, right? So it's the rings around Uranus are over kind of on its side, like a mohawk, right? And so it's kind of like this, it kind of shakes things up a little bit. And having Uranus join the moon, sometimes, like, you know, the moon is our emotional self. So sometimes, like, shaking things up, like, in regards to where our emotions are at, is not exactly, you know, I mean, it's not exactly the most comfortable place for, you know, for the moon and Uranus to be. And so I think that, you know, what we're going to see a lot from this particular full moon this upcoming week is, you know, it looks like, you know, there could be some type of, you know, it could be like there could be a little bit of difficulty around things like emotionally. We do have, you know, Venus, granted, you know, she's in Scorpio, and granted, she's, you know, in retrograde right now. She's on vacation right now. But the thing is that, you know, it seems to me like there's some type of healing thing that's coming and that's bubbling up at the surface at this full moon, right? You have these two fixed signs that don't normally like to budge, but you have Uranus in there that's kind of wanting to rattle and shake things up. You have Venus that's there that's kind of trying to do this healing journey. And so I see that though there could potentially be kind of some difficult feelings and difficult emotions that kind of like come out of nowhere, right, around this full moon, this upcoming Wednesday, it's doing so that way, you know, all of this fixed energy around it can heal. It's kind of like certain things need to kind of just like come off and be removed and break free, right? Like our second theme, break free, so that way true healing can occur, right? So that way we can really dig down deep inside of our emotions and really just kind of come to a place that, you know, just kind of come to a place of healing. You know, maybe we've kind of been sitting on something for a while and not wanting to budge, right, with all that fixed energy. And then kind of, you know, this particular full moon with Uranus and everything else, it's like, no, we're gonna break free of that. And, you know, I do see that Saturn, you know, definitely is still in somewhat of a favorable position at this particular full moon as well. So I think that whatever things that are sort of coming to the surface, even if they are difficult or unexpected at the time of this full moon or around this full moon, I think that generally for the long term with Saturn's position there, I think that, you know, I think that it's going to kind of, it's gonna be okay. It's gonna work out okay in the end. The changes and things that are starting to kind of come up and surface this upcoming week around this full moon are changes that have been a long time coming, are changes that have really needed to happen. And I think that there's a lot of healing wrapped around all of this momentum at this full moon. So even though it might feel a little tough, like at the time, I think that it's sort of wrapped in a blanket of like warmth and healing and love. So anyway, so that's everything for this week. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you have any comments, go ahead and leave them below. And thank you so much, and I will see you next week. Thanks again. Cheers.